Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Couch Coaches. He's Jeff. He's Brian. I'm Denny. And we know sports. Okay, this segment, we're going to talk about the 5 greatest running backs of all time. We all picked which ones we thought was our 5 best. So we're going to start off with Brian and see who his number 1 is.
My number 1, always one of my favorite players of all time, is Barry Sanders. And the reason that is because if Barry had half the line that some of these other guys had, and if he had half the team around him that some of these other guys had, he would be the rushing leader. He would. He ran more yards sideways and backwards than he did forwards.
He also lost more yards than any other player.
The thing is, he had nobody around him. And he made a team that was terrible relevant. He should have never got any of them teams to the playoffs, and he did. He won an NFL MVP, and he has 15,269 yards of career rushing, 99 career rushing touchdowns, and 10 receiving touchdowns. He was the team.
Yes.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
And he changed the game. He changed the way that the running back position was played.
Good solid number 1. My number 1 is Walter Payton.
Yes.
Walter Payton was kind of like Barry Sanders, like Brian was saying. He didn't have any team. You know, I watched him in the 70s as a kid, and you just thought the poor guy has nothing around him. But yet he would turn one way, turn the other way, and go run into the end zone, carrying the football like a loaf of bread. And he would get there every single time.
Mike Ditka robbed him of a Super Bowl touchdown.
Yeah, he
by
did.
putting it in the fridge.
Yeah, he did. You know, some highlights of Walter Payton's career. He's a 9-time Pro Bowler. He has 16,726 career rushing yards. He's a Hall of Famer. And most people, I can't say all people, but a lot of people, most people, call him the greatest running back of all time. Jeff, who you got for your number 1?
I can't believe we have all 3 different ones. I know you guys talked about it, but I wasn't in on that conversation.
We didn't talk about it until after we were done.
All I'm saying is I took Jim Brown, the legend. He is the original running back legend. You want to talk about stats? The man has 1 ring, 3 MVPs, a Super Bowl MVP, 3-time TD leader.
Well, let's just back up here a second. He never had a Super Bowl MVP because he never played in the Super Bowl.
He's got a ring.
Not a Super Bowl ring.
Before the Super Bowls?
That was
Yeah.
before.
How many Super Bowls have the Browns played in?
Jesus. You gonna call me out like that? That's just mean. That's just mean. I don't like the Browns. Why would I know that? Jim Brown is a legend.
He is. It's a very good pick. I just had to give Jeff a hard time. Sorry about that, Jeff.
Hey, and just so you know, Barry Sanders was my number 2, and Walter Payton was my number 3. So we're right down the list.
Yeah. And we're probably all going to be pretty close to the same, just in different order. So, Brian, who do you got for your number 2?
My number 2 is Walter Payton. If you don't have Walter Payton in your top 5, you don't know football.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Absolutely.
He's in your top 5 no matter what. So.
Yeah. He did things that were just unbelievable. You know, he was called Sweetness for a reason. You know, he would glide across the field, and it was amazing to watch him play. And I feel fortunate that I was alive during his era.
Absolutely. My pick, I was not alive to actually see, or I think I was alive, but I wasn't watching.
Right.
You know, I didn't have a chance to appreciate Jim Brown.
I wasn't alive.
But Walter Payton, on the other hand, I watched those teams with the Fridge, with Mike Singletary,
Jim McMahon, Willie Gault.
They had the Super Bowl shuffle.
Yeah, Super Bowl shuffle.
It was the thing in the '80s. They were America's sweetheart team.
That dominated a game that was a brutal game.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the 70s football is so much different than it is now.
Yes.
I mean, there were games that were, John Madden used to call them slobber knockers.
Yep.
And that's exactly what they were. You know, they would just knock the crap out of each other.
They didn't have all these girl rules.
No.
Quarterbacks, you had to be tough to be a quarterback back in the day.
And if you're a wide receiver, don't you dare come across the middle.
Yeah.
You're going to get laid out.
A Wes Welker would have died in the 70s. Just saying. They literally took him off on a stretcher and probably not revived him.
Yep, that's probably true. So, my number 2 is Barry Sanders. Kind of for that same reason. The reason why I didn't have Barry number 1 is because of all of the yards that he did lose. Barry was a great running back, but he would lose 6 yards. He would lose 8 yards, and then all of a sudden he'd gain 25 yards. And then he'd lose 4 yards, and he'd lose 3 yards, and he'd gain 10 yards.
Yeah.
And he was fun to watch because of that.
But a lot of the yards he lost and how that happened
Was
Because he had a poor team.
poor team.
poor team.
Yeah.
I mean, they lined him up 8 yards back.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the first to run that. What do they call that? The long pistol or
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's why he retired early. He had a terrible team around him. He was just done. He was done carrying the team.
He straight out said he had more years left, but he did not want to break Walter Payton's record with a losing squad.
Yeah. And
I mean, he said those words.
And the thing is, that's class.
Absolutely.
Right there.
absolutely.
Class act.
Yep.
And that makes you a great.
Yeah, Barry Sanders was a great guy, and again, fortunate that I was alive during the time that he
For
played.
God's sakes, he gave away his Heisman Trophy.
Yeah,
He did.
He was a different guy. He's
Yeah.
just a classy guy.
And my number 2 is Walter Payton. And so that we don't get too long-winded and going over the same people twice, my number 3 is Barry Sanders.
There you go.
Who you got for your number 3?
My number 3 is the Rambassador, Eric Dickerson.
Eric Dickerson.
Eric Dickerson was a beast.
Yes, he
And
was.
just some highlights here. He had 13,259 rushing yards, 90 career rushing touchdowns.
2,100 yards receiving.
Holds the record for the most rushing yards in a season.
Yep.
That happened in like
Still.
1983,
And that was 21. By the way, that was 2,108 yards.
205, and he still holds that record. And that was
Still holds it.
That
just
is a
right
five.
after they went from 14-game season to a 16-game season, which everybody was like, "Well, it's a 16-game season. That's why he had so many yards." Really? Because nobody's done it since.
Yeah. Nobody's matched
done it.
that.
Yeah. Now we have a 17-game season, and I don't even know if anybody will do it for the next few years because
Well, teams don't run the ball as much.
Eric Dickerson.
And we do running back by committee.
Eric Dickerson had a glide like nobody else. And he just galloped through the hole.
But then on the other hand, he was a bruiser. He would go in the middle gaps and he would run linebackers over. Linebackers did not want to tackle him one-on-one.
Here's
He
one more
was a
thing.
big dude.
Here's one more thing. He led the league in rushing 4 times. In when rushing was a big thing.
Yeah, when everybody did.
When the running back position was a big thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So my number 3 is Jim Brown. Jim Brown, kind of like what Jeff said, he's a 3-time MVP. He led the league in rushing 8 different times. He has 12,312 yards career rushing. He was the
13.
original. He was the
I got 13.
12,312 is what I got. Yeah, well, I don't know which one of us is
12,000, 13,000 yards. He's still, the man had a career.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like Jeff said, not to get long-winded, I have Jim Brown at number 4.
Jim Brown is a legend.
If he's not in your top 5 as well, you probably shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, and Jeff, you had Walter Payton as your number 3?
Added Walter Payton.
Okay, you have Jim Brown as your number 4, so I'll move on to my number 4 is LaDainian Tomlinson.
Oh, I had him at number 5.
LaDainian Tomlinson, he was an NFL MVP, 5-time Pro Bowler. He still holds the records for most rushing touchdowns in a season. 28 rushing touchdowns in a season.
Yes.
Imagine that. 28 rushing touchdowns in a season. That's almost 2 a game average.
I was pretty young when he did that, but I was still watching football. That was just a magical season.
But
that
he
guy couldn't be stopped
No.
the whole year.
He gets inside the red zone, he was taking it to the house. And he, like you said, he led the league in rushing touchdowns 3 different years.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy was money, you know?
Yeah.
You get in the red zone, he handled LT.
Yeah. And my last thing with LT is he was one of the first running backs that would catch the ball like crazy coming out of the backfield.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
if
He showed why dual threat was a thing.
he was the check down guy, he was the check down guy, he was the check down guy. I know that Roger Craig was the first running back to have 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving, but he still wasn't like LaDainian Tomlinson where everybody just looked to him, see what he was going to do, where he was going to be.
And the thing is, too, as Barry said, he played for a bad team. You know, they just weren't a complete team, and it was him. It was him.
Him, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton. The reasons why they had good years was because of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Those teams went as far as they went.
Yeah, exactly. So, who'd you have for your number 4, Jeff?
Emmitt Smith.
No,
You cannot have a top 5 without Emmitt Smith.
you can.
No, you can't.
We saw 2 of them right
You're
here.
straight out not respecting the fucking game if you don't have him in your top 5.
Product of a system and a
Product
good
of a
team around
system.
him.
Stop it.
And it's a longevity record that he broke as the career leader in rushing yards.
It was a longevity. But that man, he played in tough games. They gave him the ball 60% of the time. I mean, he was surrounded by great talent. But they fed him. They fed him. And they were playing the Giants at the end of I think it was the 93 season. And the winner went to the playoffs, loser did not. And he had a dislocated shoulder as he was running. And they just kept giving him the ball despite he had it. I think it was Michael Strahan that tackled him. And he goes, I helped him up and I told him, don't you come my way with the ball again. I know you're hurting. And then they give him the ball, and I had to do my job. And I tackled him again. I heard him wince, and he goes back to the huddle, and they give him the ball again. And I had to do my job, and I had to hurt that man, and he never kept coming. And that's a story of a real running back, because that's what they do.
I don't disagree with that. I think that is a story of a real running back. The reason why I didn't have Emmitt Smith in my top 5 is Emmitt Smith never did anything spectacular.
No.
You know, he
was
wasn't.
Mr. Consistency.
He wasn't a Walter Payton.
Absolutely,
He wasn't a
he was
Walter,
Mr.
or he
Consistent.
wasn't a Barry Sanders. He wasn't a LaDainian Tomlinson. He
No.
wasn't a Jim Brown. He didn't. I mean, he just he got his yards, and he was solid. But to me, he just wasn't a top 5 running back.
Literally, you knew what you were going to get out of him. And no matter how hard a team tried to take him away, they didn't. You could stack the box against him, and he still got his 4.5 yards.
I'm not taking away that he's a great, because he is on the greats list. He's just not top 5. And the reason that, for me, he's excluded from the top 5 is the product of the team that he had around him. He had the best offensive line in football possibly ever assembled.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree
The
with that.
offensive line benefited from having a back like him also.
And I don't disagree with that.
I mean,
true.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. You put a Dorsett back there who always bounced around between the gaps, and that offensive line wouldn't look
He
as
was a
good.
great running back.
He
If we
was a
went to
great
the top
running back.
10,
But
that would have been one of my guys.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he was not conducive to an offensive line scheme. Because he get the ball, he comes to a stop, and he bounces around. You had no idea where that guy was going to go, which made him a great running back because he picked and found his holes. But Emmitt Smith, his line knew exactly where he was going to go, exactly how he was going to act, and they were able to block and make names for themselves, knowing that he's going to do his job.
Yeah.
For me, Michael Irvin, Aikman, and Emmitt Smith are taken away from the top 5s because of the team they had around.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yes,
They
because
made those teams. That's why they're top 5. Because they were one of the most potent
They
offenses
didn't
of
make
all
anything
time.
special. They didn't do anything
They did
special.
do something special. They won 3 Super Bowls. 4.
4 Super Bowls.
4 Super Bowls.
But it was a collective effort.
It
is
was
what
a
I'm
collective effort because they were all great players. They were all top 5 players at their game. Well, Michael Irvin wasn't, but the other 2 were.
I know what Jeff's saying, and I kind of get that. But I also get what Brian's saying. It was a whole. The team as a whole
Yes.
is why the Cowboys were so good.
Yes.
You know, don't forget Jay Novacek. And don't
So
forget
you
the
would
offensive
keep-
line, Larry Brown.
So
some
why
of
didn't
those
we
guys they
leave
had.
Joe Montana off the list? He was surrounded by a great team. He had running backs. He had some of the best wide receivers in the game. That was a decent offensive line. You had one of the greatest defenses of that era. But yet we put him on the list.
Okay, we talked about quarterbacks last week.
I'm just
We're not
saying.
talking about quarterbacks.
So we knock out running backs out of the thing because they're surrounded by a great team.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bullshit reason to keep someone out.
The thing is, most of these guys on this list, and you had a lot of these guys on this list as well, they were a better team because of that particular person.
Yeah, and that's what
They
I was
weren't
going
a
to say
product of a system.
about the 49ers. They were a better team because of Joe Montana.
Yes.
When Emmitt Smith was hurt, they went 1-3 or 1-4, if I remember correct, and they barely made the playoffs. I think it was in '94 when he got hurt and actually missed games, which he didn't do much.
He didn't do much,
No.
that's for sure.
But when he was out, they lost. So that means that he made them better. Even though that was a Super Bowl caliber team year in, year out at that time.
I understand your argument. Not taking away from you. But that's just why he's not on mine. So.
You don't have to be on yours. You're just wrong. Just wrong.
All right, moving on. Brian, who you got your number 5 guy?
My number 5 was LT. Yeah, LT was my number 5. I got to see and actually watch him. A lot of these guys I didn't get to see and watch because I was too young. But it doesn't take away the fact that I respected the old way of the game. But for me, the first guy and the only guy that I can put as a recent guy in that conversation is LT.
Yeah, and I agree with that. When I was going through my list and going through the teams who I thought were my top 5 players, he was one that I kind of forgot. But you forget how great he was. And he was so special to that team and so special to the game of football. Just for the things that he did, for the
Yes.
things that he could do.
For sure.
So, my 5th pick was Eric Dickerson. Again,
Yes.
Mine too.
yeah, and Jeff's is too. So we pretty much, other than Emmitt Smith, we pretty much agree on the top 5 running backs, just a little bit different order.
Yeah, I had LT as my honorable mention.
and it's, as if you want to get in a couple honorable mentions, I had Adrian Peterson, Earl Campbell,
Yes.
I
Tony
had trouble
Dorsett.
keeping Earl off.
I had trouble keeping Earl off too.
I just didn't know who to kick out.
Yeah, the first big bruising running back was Earl Campbell. I mean, nobody dealt out punishment like he did.
Him and John Riggins.
Yeah.
I mean, they ran with a style where their back was straight. They stood up as they went through the line, and they'd still run you over.
Yeah.
I mean, just brutal.
Talk about today's game. Derrick Henry's a guy that reminds me a lot of Earl Campbell.
He's an old school running back.
He is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our greatest running backs of all time for tonight.
Make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe to us so that you can catch some of these shorter sections and understand why old school is better than new school.